Okay, so we put this screencast together for you guys to get a better idea of what you need to do for the conclusion for the ecosystem project. At this point on the right-hand side here, you can see a data table that's completed, and this is where you should be at this point. All of your sections up to and including your data table should be done. Everything should be neat and organized. As you can see in this person, they have all the days listed, quantitative information and qualitative over here on the right-hand side. We're over on the left-hand side here ready to start our conclusion, and this is probably the most important part of your project and the most difficult as well. The whole point of the conclusion is to explain what your original hypothesis was and whether or not it was correct, with some data to back it up from your observations and quantitative data. The first part here, part one, is your hypothesis. You're going to restate your hypothesis, and then you're going to explain if it was right or wrong in just a quick few summarizing statements. The following sections after that will in more detail explain why your hypothesis was right or wrong, talking about your populations, your food web, carbon oxygen cycle, water cycle, and so on. Part two of your conclusion is where you're going to discuss your populations. This is going to be a written paragraph somewhere between 4 and 7 sentences long. You're going to discuss your populations in your ecosystem, and we gave you some prompting questions here about populations, limiting factors, and carrying capacity. You should answer all of these questions in your response. Part 3 has you examine your food web of your ecosystem. This will include a written response where you answer the questions that you see here, and additionally you will create a food web of your ecosystem and a second food web of what your ecosystem would look like if you were to do it again. If you look on the right hand side here, you can see a student example of someone that created a food web of their current ecosystem, and then they developed another food web as if they were to do this again, what their new food web would look like. Even if your ecosystem did well, you should still create a new food web from things that you've learned in class that you might consider adding now that you have a little more knowledge and information. You can create these food webs in whatever application you want. You can use Google Drawing, you can use Bubble.us or SpiderScribe, the same things that we use to make our concept maps. The choice is yours. Then down here in part 4, the carbon oxygen cycle, you're going to have a written response, a few sentences answering the questions that you see here in this section. And then additionally, you are going to take a picture of your ecosystem and draw the carbon oxygen cycle on the actual picture. You can do this however you want. You could do this on your iPhone. You could pull the picture up and go to markup and edit it from there. I'll show you quickly how you could use what's called Google Drawings to do this. So if you just go to Google, in the search bar, draw Google Drawing. The first link will take you right to the platform. You'll have a screen that looks something like this. Then what you can do is you can insert an image, upload from your computer, or you can upload from your drive. And you want to drop in a picture of your ecosystem. To draw on the image, you go up to the top where it says line and click the drop down arrow. If you want to do straight lines, you can do line or arrow. Or you go down here to scribble, and this is where you can kind of draw a little more freehand on your diagram. You see I'll draw an arrow here like this. You can go up to the top here. You can change the line color to a different color so it sticks out. You can click on the line weight and make it a thicker arrow so it shows up a little better. You can give it, you can draw as many arrows as you need based on which diagram you're doing. You can move the arrows around, or I'm sorry, you move your image around. You can also move the arrows around after you've drawn them. You can delete them and start again. It's up to you. To do a new arrow, you just click on scribble and do the same thing again. You can draw arrows wherever you want. You can also add text boxes by clicking on text box. You just type in, and then what you can do is you can edit the text boxes. Right now you can't really see what that says, so if you go up here, you can give it a fill color, you can give it a white background, you can change the font, make it bolder, you can make it bigger up here using these options. So you will do a diagram for the carbon oxygen cycle where it exists in your ecosystem. You should have all the parts of the carbon oxygen cycle, obviously except for combustion. All right, coming back over here to the directions, you should also do the same thing for the water cycle. So you should copy and paste a new image, recreate a new diagram of where the water cycle takes place in your ecosystem. regardless of whether you have a terrestrial or a water ecosystem, you will still have the water cycle happening to some capacity. At the bottom here, we have experimental errors. So in this section, you are going to describe any experimental errors that occurred. And what I mean by experimental errors, these are things with the design of our experiment, not necessarily how you designed your project, but overall, what are some issues with our overall experiment? So consider the placement of the ecosystems, the environment that they're in. Consider if we were able to control all the variables from one project to another. That's what you will mention in this part 6. So this should be a well-developed paragraph, again, about 4 to 7 complete sentences. And then the final section, section 7, is our reflection paragraph. In this section, you should have a well-developed paragraph, more than 5 sentences, explaining everything that you would do differently, kind of wrap up everything that you've discussed so far, the things that you did well in the experiment and things that you would change if you were to do this experiment again. If your experiment was not very successful, you should have a lot more to talk about in terms of what you would do differently. And even if your project was successful, you should still consider some things that you would do differently to make it even better. Overall, this conclusion is more than half of your project, so you should make sure to spend a lot of time thoroughly going through each section and making sure that you're answering all the questions. Good luck.